The cost of living crisis has definitely been one of the major challenges facing all Australians this year, and it's sure to be a key issue at the next election. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, has been talking up a range of cost of living measures which will kick in on New Year's Day. These include indexation freeze on pharmaceutical benefits scheme co-payments, as well as payment increases for youth allowance recipients who have dependents. But it remains to be seen whether these measures will be enough. Joining me now to discuss all of that and more is Sky News contributor and child and adolescent psychologist Clare Rowe. Clare, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me. Jim Chalmers has been spruiking what he calls the Albanese government's meaningful and responsible cost of living help. I think he adds responsible in there to try to make us think it's not going to affect inflation. I wanted to ask you, though, because you're dealing with families all the time, what sort of impact is the cost of living crisis having on family dynamics, and is there more the government should be doing?
Yeah, well, thanks, James, and Happy New Year to you too. Yeah, I think we need to unpack these figures because I think on the outset they do look like they might provide relief, but the way I see it, this is a very piecemeal splash cash approach, and I don't think it's going to have much, real impact on the families that I see that are really in pain at the petrol bowser and at the checkout. I think at the end of the day, this is very much pre-campaigning dressed up as policy. I mean, things like you mentioned, the indexation freeze with the pharmaceutical benefits scheme, that's going to save Aussie families a couple of bucks. But I think over the 5 years, on one hand, it's a lot of money the government is spending, and it's at the same time a drop in the ocean compared to the pain that Aussie families are in at the moment. You mentioned again the $30 rise for an individual on youth allowance. Well, I don't know about you, James, but I don't know what $30 buys you at the supermarket, because I am increasingly shocked at how light my shopping bags are when I tap the $100 on the credit card. So $30 doesn't get you much. So, no one's going to turn back $30 in their bank account, but will it provide an individual with some relief at the moment? Probably not. But at the same time, the amount of cash the government will spend on that scheme is just a ticking time bomb for inflation. So, yeah, I think it's a very piecemeal approach. I think it's dressed up looking at riding a news cycle into the campaign and the election next year. And I'm doubtful that will provide really some relief, and families will actually feel it in their hip pocket come tomorrow when this is rolled out.
Yeah, I think you're right. When it gets to it, it doesn't make a lot of difference, but it's an announcement and it gives the appearance of the government doing something to help. I want to go to some interesting polling analysis, which shows a lot of young voters have moved away from the Greens in the last quarter of the year. According to Resolve Political Monitor, voters aged 18 to 34 have cut the Greens' primary vote from 27% to 23%. That's 2 points down from the 2022 election. What do you think's driving this trend? Because, the Greens typically rely on younger voters for support, which is why the Greens always want to reduce the voting age, right? But we're seeing this trend now where young people are drifting away from the Greens. What do you think's happening?
Well, it's interesting, and I think it tells a very significant story at the moment for the Australian political landscape. And I think at the end of the day, as psychologists, we talk about a hierarchy of needs. And right at the top of those needs, you know what's there? The ability to feed yourself and the ability to house yourself. And if you can't do those two things, well, all this rhetoric and talk around kind of progressive and feel-good policies on climate change and Middle Eastern politics, that just goes down the priorities. And so young people are looking at this, and I think that they, gradually, finally becoming pretty disillusioned with Ban's kind of rhetoric heavy and results light approach. But I think at the end of the day, the two major parties are benefiting from that. Labor, I think, is clawing back some of its younger votes. But I think the coalition, this shows that there is room there for policies that centre around economic stability, housing supply, personal responsibility. And these are the exact values the coalition should be amplifying. So there is room there for young voters for the coalition. But here's the kicker, James. I think out of these figures today, what it showed actually is that whilst both major parties are gaining in young voters, by the time you get to middle-aged voters, that's probably me, and definitely over 55s, they are decisively going towards the coalition. And so, whilst Albanese may be the preferred Prime Minister for young voters at the moment compared to Dutton, clearly so, that margin absolutely decreases once people get a bit older, and it completely flips when you look at the over 55s. So I think at the end of the day, it comes down to those basic needs, and young people as well as older people are pretty disappointed by promises that haven't been met by this government.
My heart was in my mouth for a minute there, Claire. You talked about young voters, then middle-aged voters like yourself, and then I wondered where you were going to go and where you were going to put me. Hey, before I let you go, as a psychologist, obviously this is the time of year people are making New Year's resolutions. Is it too late for people who haven't made resolutions? How important is it to make resolutions, and what are some tips on making resolutions that will actually be meaningful?
Well, I know not everyone's into New Year's resolutions. I love them. I think there is something really enticing still with human nature of a blank page and a fresh start tomorrow. But, of course, you can make resolutions 365 days of the year. My tip for everyone wanting to make resolutions is to think small, think about habits. And a habit is a small behaviour that is done consistently. So if you want to clean up your diet, don't go the full hog and cut everything out. Just think about reducing, say, your intake of soft drinks for the next 3 months, and then habit stack, we call it as psychologists. You stack another habit onto that in a couple of months' time. So think small. 80% of resolutions don't work. People don't stick to them. I think generally it's because people have too great expectations for what they can achieve. And when motivation dwindles, which it's going to do, you want those new habits to be fairly easy.
Very good advice. Clare Rowe, always a pleasure to talk to you. Have a happy new year. Whatever you're doing tonight, I trust you enjoy it, and all the very best for 2025.